Text 49. Dure nahi avaram karma buddhi yoga dhananjaya buddhau sharanam anvicha kripana palahetava. Durena discarded at long distance. He certainly avaram abominable karma activities. Buddhi yoga on the strength of Krishna consciousness. Dhananjaya, O conqueror of wealth, Buddha in such consciousness. Sharanam, full surrender, Anvicha, trifer, Kripana, misers, Falahetava, those desiring fruitive results. Translation. O Dhananjaya, keep all the abominable activities far distanced by devotional service, and in that consciousness surrender unto the Lord. Those who want to enjoy the fruits of their work are misers. Purport. One who has actually come to understand one's constitutional position as an eternal servant of the Lord gives up all engagement save working in Krishna consciousness. As already explained, Buddhi Yoga means transcendental loving service to the Lord. Such devout service is the right course of action for the living entity. Only misers desire to enjoy the fruit of their own work just to be further entangled in material bondage. Except for work in Krishna consciousness, all activities are abominable because they continually bind the worker to the cycle of birth and death. One should therefore never desire to be the cause of work. Everything should be done in Krishna consciousness for the satisfaction of Krishna. Misers do not know how to utilize the assets of riches which they acquire by good fortune or by hard labor. One should spend all energies working in Krishna consciousness, and that will make one's life successful. Like misers, unfortunate persons do not employ their human energy in the service of the Lord. Text 50. Buddhi yukto jahatiha ube sukrita duskrute tasmad yoga yujyasva yoga karma kaushalam. Buddhi yukta, one who is engaged in devotional service, jahati can get rid of, iha in this life, ube both sukruta duskrute, good and bad results. Tasmad, therefore, yogaya, for the sake of devotion service. Yujyasva, be so engaged. Yoga, Krishna consciousness. Yoga, Krishna consciousness. Karma, su, in all activities. Kaushalam, art. Translation. A man engaged in devotional service rids himself of both good and bad reactions even in this life. Therefore, strive for yoga, which is the art of all work. Purport. Since time immemorial, each living entity has accumulated the various reactions to his good and bad work. As such, he is continuously ignorant of his real constitutional position. One's ignorance can be removed by the instruction of the Bhagavad Gita, which teaches one to surrender unto Lord Sri Krishna in all respects and become liberated from the chained victimization of action and reaction, birth after birth. Arjuna is therefore advised to act in Krishna consciousness, the purifying process of resultant action. Karmajam buddhi yukta hi phalam tyaktva manishina janma bandha vinirmukta padam gacchantanamayam. Karmajam, due to fruitive activities, buddhi yukta, being engaged in devotional service, he certainly phalam results tyaktva, giving up. Manishina, great sages or devotees, janma bandha, from the bondage of birth and death. Vinirmukta, liberated. Padam, position, gachanti, they reach anamayam, without miseries. Translation. By thus engaging in devotional service to the Lord, great sages or devotees free themselves from the results of work in the material world. In this way, they become free from the cycle of birth and death and attain the state beyond all miseries by going back to Godhead. Purport. The liberated living entities belong to that place where there are no material miseries. The Bhagavatam 10:14-58 says, Samashitaye padapallavam klavam mahat padam punyeshu murare bhavam vatsa padam padam yat vipadam natesham. For one who has accepted the boat of the lotus feet of the Lord, who is the shelter of the cosmic manifestation and who is famous as Mukunda, or the giver of Mukti, the ocean of material world, is like the water contained in a calf's hoofprint. Parampadam, or the place where there are no material miseries, or Vaikuntha is his goal, not the place where there is danger in every step of life. Owing to ignorance, one does not know that this material world is a miserable place where there are dangers at every step. Out of ignorance, only the less intelligent persons try to adjust to the situation by fruitive activities, thinking that the resultant actions will make them happy. They do not know that no kind of material body anywhere within the universe can give life without miseries. The miseries of life, namely birth, death, old age, and diseases, are present everywhere within the material world. But one who understands his real constitutional position as the eternal servant of the Lord and thus knows the position of the personality of Godhead, engages himself in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. Consequently, he becomes qualified to enter into the Vaikuntha planets, where there is neither material, measurable life nor the influence of time and death. To know one's constitutional position means to know also the sublime position of the Lord. One who wrongly thinks that the living entity's position and the Lord's position are on the same level is to be understood to be in the darkness and therefore unable to engage himself in the devotional service of the Lord. He becomes a Lord himself and thus paves the way for repetition of birth and death. But one who understanding that his position is to serve transfers himself to the service of the Lord, at once becomes eligible for Vaikuntha Loka. Service for the cause of the Lord is called Karma Yoga or Buddhi Yoga, or in plain words, devotional service to the Lord. Text 52. Yada te moha kalilam buddhir gatayarishyati tada gantasi nirvedam shrotavyasya shrutasya cha. Yada, when they, your moha of illusion, kalilam, dense forest, buddhi, transcendental service with intelligence, vyatitarishati, surpasses, tada, at that time, gantasi, you shall go, nirvedam, callousness, shrotavyasya, toward all that is to be heard, shrutasya, all that is already heard, cha, also, translation. When your intelligence has passed out of the dense forest of delusion, you shall become indifferent to all that has been heard and all that is to be heard. Purport: there are many good examples in the lives of great devotees of the Lord, those who became indifferent to the rituals of the Vedas simply by devotional service to the Lord. When a person factually understands Krishna and his relationship with Krishna, he naturally becomes completely indifferent to the rituals of fruitive activities, even though an experienced Brahmana Shri Madhavendra Puri, a great devotee and an acharya in the line of devotees, says, Sandhyavandanam bhadram astu bhavatu bho snanatubhyam namo bho deva pitarascha tarpana vidau naham kshama kshamayatam yatra kvapi nishad. Sorry, the tune is different. Sandhya Vandanabhadramastu Bhavato Bho Snanatubhyam Namo Bho Deva Pitarascha Tarpana Vido Naham Kshama Kshamyatam Yatra Kvapi Nishadya Yadava Kulao Tamasya Kamsadvisha Smaram agam harami tadalam manye ki manye name. O my prayers 3 times a day, all glory to you. O bathing, I offer my obeisances unto you. O demigods, O forefathers, please excuse me from the inability to offer you my respects. Now, wherever I sit, I can remember the great descendant of Yadu dynasty, Krishna, the enemy of Kamsa, and thereby I can free myself from all sinful bondage. I think this is sufficient for me. The Vedic rites and rituals are imperative for neophytes, comprehending all kinds of prayer 3 times a day, taking a bath early in the morning, offering respects to the forefathers, etc. But when one is fully in Krishna consciousness and is engaged in his transcendental loving service, one becomes indifferent to all these regulative principles because he already had attained perfection. If one can reach the platform of understanding by service to the Supreme Lord Krishna, he has no longer to execute different types of penances and sacrifices as recommended in revealed scriptures. And similarly, if one has not understood that the purpose of Vedas is to reach Krishna and simply engages in the rituals, etc., then is uselessly wasting time in such engagements. Persons in Krishna consciousness transcend the limit of Shabda Brahma or the range of the Vedas and Upanishads. Text 53. Shruti vipratipannate yada stasyati nischala samadho achala buddhis tada yogam avapsasi. Shruti of Vedic revelation vipratipanna, without being influenced by fruitive results. Te your yada, when stasyati remains nischala, unmoved, samadho, in transcendental consciousness or Krishna consciousness, achala, unflinching, buddhi, intelligence, tada, at that time, yogam, self-realization, avapsasi, you will achieve. When your mind is no longer disturbed by the flowery language of the Vedas and when it remains fixed in the trance of self-realization, then you'll have then you will have attained the divine consciousness. To say that one is in samadhi is to say that one has fully realized Krishna consciousness, and that one in full samadhi has realized Brahman, Paramatma and Bhagavan. The highest perfection of self-realization is to understand that one is eternally the servant of Krishna, and that one's only business is to discharge one's duties in Krishna consciousness. A Krishna conscious person or unflinching devotee of the Lord should not be disturbed by the flowery language of the Vedas, nor be engaged in fruitive activities for promotion to the heavenly kingdom. In Krishna consciousness, one comes directly into the communion with Krishna, and thus all directions from Krishna may be understood in the transcendental state. One is sure to achieve results by such activities and attain conclusive knowledge. One has only to carry out the orders of Krishna or his representative, the spiritual master. Text 54. Arjuna Vacha Sthitapragyasya ka bhasha samadhistasya keshava siddhadi kim prabhasheta kim asita vrajeta kim. Arjuna Vacha, Arjuna said, Sthitapragyasya, of one who is situated in Krishna, fixed Krishna consciousness, ka what? Bhasha, language, samadhistasya, of one is situated in trance, Keshava, Krishna, siddhadi, one fixed in Krishna consciousness, kim what? Prabhasheta, speaks, kim what? Kim how? Asita, does remain still, Vrajeta, walks, kim how? Translation. Arjuna said, O Krishna, what are the symptoms of one whose consciousness is thus merged in transcendence? How does he speak and what is his language? How does he sit and how does he walk? Purport. As there are symptoms for each and every man in terms of his particular situation, similarly one who is Krishna conscious has his particular nature, talking, walking, thinking, feeling, etc. As a rich man has his symptoms by which he is known as a rich man, as a diseased man has his symptoms by which he is known as diseased, or as a learned man has his symptoms. So a man in transcendental consciousness of Krishna has specific symptoms in various dealings. One can know his specific symptoms from the Bhagavad Gita. Most important is how the man in Krishna consciousness speaks, for speech is the most important quality of any man. It is said that a fool is undiscovered as long as he does not speak, and certainly a well-dressed fool cannot be identified unless he speaks. But as soon as he speaks, he reveals himself at once. The immediate symptom of a Krishna conscious man is that he speaks only of Krishna and of matters relating to him. Other symptoms then automatically flow, as stated below. Text 55. Shri Bhagavan Vacha Prajahati Yada Kaman Sarvan Partha Manogatan Atmani Eva Atmana Tushta Sthita Pragyasta Docchate. Shri Bhagavan Vacha, the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, Prajahati gives up Yada when Kaman desires for sense gratification, Sarvan of all varieties. Partha, O son of Pritha, Manogatan of mental concoction, Atmani in the pure state of the soul, Eva certainly, Atmana by the purified mind, Tushta satisfied, Sthita Pragya transcendently situated, Tada at that time, Uchyate is said. Translation. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, O Partha, when a man gives up all varieties of desire for sense gratification, which arise from mental concoction, and when his mind thus purified finds satisfaction in the self alone, then he is said to be in pure transcendental consciousness. The Bhagavatam affirms that any person who is fully in Krishna consciousness or devotional service of the Lord has all the good qualities of great sages, whereas a person who is not so transcendently situated has no good qualifications, because he is sure to be taking refuge in his own mental concoctions. Consequently, it is rightly said herein that one has to give up all kinds of sense desire manufactured by mental concoction. Artificially, such sense desires cannot be stopped, but if one is engaged in Krishna consciousness, then automatically sense desires subside without extraneous efforts. Therefore, one has to engage himself in Krishna consciousness without hesitation for this devotional service. Without hesitation, for this devotional service will instantly help one onto the platform of transcendental consciousness. The highly developed soul always remains satisfied in himself by realizing him as the eternal servant of the Supreme Lord. Such a transcendentally situated person has no sense desires resulting from petty materialism. Rather, he remains happy in his natural position of eternally serving the Supreme Lord. Text 56. Dukeshwanadvigna mana sukeshu vigata spriha vitaraga bhaya krodha stitadir muniruchyate. Dukeshu in the threefold miseries, Anudvignamana without being agitated in mind, Sukeshu in happiness, Vigata Spriha without being interested, Vita free from raga attachment, Bhaya fear, Krodha and anger, Sthitadi whose mind is steady, Muni a sage Uchyate is called. One who is not disturbed in mind even amidst the threefold miseries or elated when there is happiness, and who is free from attachment, fear and anger is called a sage of steady mind. Purport. The word Muni means one who can agitate his mind in various ways for mental speculation without coming to a factual conclusion. It is said that every Muni has a different angle of vision, and unless a Muni differs from other Munis, he cannot be called a Muni in the strict sense of the term. Nasha Rishiryasya Matam Na Bhinnam Mahabharat Vanaparva 313 chapter 117 verse. But a Siddhadir Muni, as mentioned herein by the Lord, is different from an ordinary Muni. The Siddhadir Muni is always in Krishna consciousness, for he has exhausted all his business of creative speculation. He is called Prashanta Nishesha Manorathantara, Stotra Ratna 43, or one who has surpassed the stage of mental speculation and has come to the conclusion that Lord Sri Krishna or Vasudeva is everything. Vasudeva Sarvamiti Samhatma Sudurlabha is called a Muni fixed in mind. Such a fully Krishna conscious person is not at all disturbed by the onslaughts of threefold material miseries, for he accepts all miseries as the mercy of the Lord, thinking himself only worthy of more trouble due to his past misdeeds, and he sees that his miseries by the grace of the Lord are minimized to the lowest. Similarly, when he is happy, he gives credit to the Lord, thinking himself unworthy of the happiness. He realizes that it is possible, it is due only to the Lord's grace that he is in such a comfortable condition and able to render better service to the Lord. And for the service of the Lord, he is always daring and active, and is not influenced by attachment or aversion. Attachment means accepting things for one's own sense gratification, and detachment is the absence of such sensual attachment. But one fixed in Krishna consciousness has neither attachment nor detachment, because his life is dedicated in the service of the Lord. Consequently, he is not at all angry even when his attempts are unsuccessful. Success or no success, a Krishna conscious person is always steady in his determination. Text 57. Yas sarvatra vinasnehas tattat prapya shubha shubham nabhinandanti nadveshti tasya pragya pratisthita. Yaha, one who sarvatra everywhere anabhisneha without affection, tat that prapya achieving, shubha good, ashubham evil, na never, abhinandanti praises, na never, dveshti envies, tasya his pragya perfect knowledge, pratisthita fixed translation. In the material world, one who is unaffected by whatever good or evil he may obtain, neither praising it nor despising it, is firmly fixed in perfect knowledge. There is always some upheaval in the material world which may be good or evil. One who is not agitated by such material upheavals, who is unaffected by good and evil, is to be understood to be fixed in Krishna consciousness. As long as one is in the material world, there is always the possibility of good and evil, because this world is full of duality. But one who is fixed in Krishna consciousness is not affected by good and evil, because he is simply concerned with Krishna, who is all good absolute. Such consciousness in Krishna situates one in a perfect transcendental position, called technically Samadhi. Text 58. Yada samharate chayam kurmo angani sarvashah indriyanindriyartebhyas tasya pragya pratishtita. Yada, when samharate winds up, cha also ayam he kurma tortoise angani limbs iva like sarvasha altogether indriyani senses indriyartebhya from the sense objects tasya his pragya consciousness pratishtita fixed. Translation: one who is able to withdraw his senses from sense objects as a tortoise draws its limbs within the shell is firmly fixed in perfect consciousness. Purport: the test of a yogi, devotee or self-realized soul is that he is able to control the senses according to his plan. Most people, however, are servants of the senses and are thus directed by the dictation of the senses. That is the answer to the question as to how the yogi is situated. As the yogi is situated, the senses are compared to venomous serpents. They want to act very loosely and without restriction. The yogi or devotee must be very strong to control the serpents, like a snake charmer. He never allows them to act independently. There are many injunctions in the revealed scriptures. Some of them are not do nots and some of them are do's. Unless one is able to follow the do's and the do nots, restricting oneself from sense enjoyment, It is not possible to be firmly fixed in Krishna consciousness. The best example set herein is the tortoise. The tortoise can at any moment wind up its senses and exhibit them again at any time for particular purposes. Similarly, the senses of the Krishna conscious person are used only for some particular purpose in the service of the Lord and are withdrawn otherwise. Arjuna is being taught here to use his senses for the service of the Lord instead for his own satisfaction. Keeping the senses always in the service of the Lord is an example set by the analogy of tortoise, who keeps the senses within. Vishaya vinivartante niraharasya dehina raso varjam rasopyasya param drishtva nivartate. Vishaya, objects for sense enjoyment. Vinivartante are practiced to be refrained from. Niraharasya by negative restrictions. Dehina for the embodied. Rasa varjam, giving up the taste. Rasa, sense of enjoyment. Api, although there is. Asya is param, far superior things. Drishtva, by experience. Nivartate, he sees as from. Translation: though the embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment, the taste for sense objects remains. But ceasing such engagements by experiencing higher taste, he is fixed in Krishna in consciousness. Purport: unless one is transcendently situated, it is not possible to cease from sense enjoyment. The process of restriction from sense enjoyment by rules and regulations is something like restricting disease from person from certain types of eatables. The patient, however, neither likes such restrictions nor loses his taste for eatables. Similarly, sense restriction by some spiritual process like Ashtanga Yoga in the matter of Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, etc. is recommended for less intelligent persons who have no better knowledge, but one who has tasted the beauty of the Supreme Lord Krishna in the course of his advancement in Krishna consciousness no longer has a taste for dead material things. Therefore, restrictions are there for the less intelligent neophytes in the spiritual advancement of life, but such restrictions are only good until one actually has a taste for Krishna consciousness. When one is actually Krishna conscious, he automatically loses his taste for pale things. Text 40. Yatato hi api kaunteya purushasya vipaschita indriyani pramatini haranti prasabam mana. Yatata, while endeavoring, he certainly, api, in spite of, Kaunteya, O son of Kunti, Purushasya, of a man, Vipaschita, full of discriminating knowledge, Vindriyani, the senses, Pramatini, agitating, Haranti, throw, Prasabam, by force, Manaha, the mind. The senses are so strong and impetuous, O Arjuna, that they forcibly carry away the mind even of a man of discrimination, who is endeavoring to control them. Purport: there are many learned sages, philosophers, and transcendentalists who try to conquer the senses, but in spite of their endeavors, even the greatest of them sometimes fall victim to material sense enjoyment due to the agitated mind. Even Vishwamitra, a great sage and perfect yogi, was misled by Menaka into sex enjoyment. And although the yogi was endeavoring for sense control with several types of penance and yoga practice, and of course, there are so many similar instances in the history of the world. Therefore, it is very difficult to control the mind and senses without being fully Krishna conscious. Without engaging the mind in Krishna, one cannot see such material engagements. A practical example is given by Sri Yamuna Acharya, a great saint and devotee, who says, Yadavadi mama cheta Krishna padara vinde navanavara dhamani udyatam rantumasid tadavadi batanari sangame smaryamane bhavati mukha vikara sushtu nishtivanam cha. Since my mind has been engaged in the service of the lotus feet of the Lord Krishna, I have been enjoying an ever new transcendental humor. Whenever I think of sex life with a woman, my face at once turns from it and I spit at the thought. Krishna consciousness is such a transcendental nice thing that automatically material enjoyment becomes distasteful. It is as if a hungry man had satisfied his hunger by a sufficient quantity of nutritious eatables. Maharaj Ambarish also conquered a great yogi, Durvasa Muni, simply because his mind was engaged in Krishna consciousness. Savai mana Krishna padar vandayo vachamsi vaikunta gunanu varnane.